You removed the toxic leader, hired someone great, and implemented new policies. So why is your team falling apart? The answer might surprise you.
Did you know that trauma impacts how we navigate our careers, but most career advice ignores this reality? Imagine feeling confident and safe at work while honoring your healing journey. Welcome to your Trauma Wise Career Guide, the podcast that reimagines career development for trauma survivors. I'm your host, Cindy Bennett, a trauma survivor turned trauma-informed career coach and founder of the Resilient Career Academy. If you're navigating your career while honoring your healing journey, you are in the right place.
Today, we're talking about the timeline for team recovery after toxic leadership. Because healing doesn't look like relief and immediate improvement. It looks messy, uncomfortable, and counterintuitive. It takes months, not weeks. And most leaders abandon the process right when it's actually worth. Let me tell you about Maya. 3 months after the toxic executive finally left, she was confused and concerned. She'd hired an excellent replacement, collaborative, transparent, genuinely supportive. She'd implemented new policies around psychological safety. She'd apologized to the team for not acting sooner. So why were things getting worse instead of better? 2 of her strongest performers had resigned. Another was suddenly challenging every decision. The team that had been silent during crisis mode was now bringing up issues from months ago. The collaboration she'd hoped for seemed further away than ever. Did I make a mistake, she wondered? Is the new leader not working out? Should I be doing something different? What Maya didn't understand is that her team was right on schedule. They weren't falling apart. They were finally safe enough to start healing. And healing from toxic leadership doesn't look like relief and immediate improvement. It looks messy, uncomfortable, and counterintuitive. Here's what most organizational leaders misunderstand about post-toxic leadership recovery. Safety doesn't immediately produce trust. Removing harm doesn't automatically create health. And the behaviors you see in the first 6 months after a toxic leader leaves often have very little to do with the new leader's effectiveness. When teams have survived toxic leadership, their nervous systems have been adapted to constant threat. They've learned that speaking up is dangerous, that vulnerability gets weaponized, that today's safety could be tomorrow's manipulation. These aren't beliefs you can logic away with a few reassuring statements. They're survival patterns encoded through repeated experience. The cost of misunderstanding this timeline? Leaders either give up too soon, think the situation is hopeless, or they try to rush healing in ways that actually re-traumatize their teams. They interpret necessary parts of the process as problems to solve rather than phases to support. Your team isn't being difficult. They're being intelligent. And if you understand what's actually happening at each stage, you can support rather than undermine their recovery. In the immediate aftermath of toxic leadership departure, you might observe what looks like improvement. The team seems relieved. Meetings feel lighter. People smile more. You might think, great, we're through the worst of it. Don't be fooled. This isn't healing. It's shock wearing off and cautious hope emerging. Your team is in the state of, is this real? They want to believe things will be different, but their nervous systems remember that hope has been dangerous before. During this phase, the team is engaged in sophisticated threat assessment. They're watching everything the new leader does, looking for signs that this is genuine change rather than manipulation. They're testing reality against their survival expectations. You'll notice hypervigilance around leadership behavior, consensus seeking before anyone speaks up, and continued reluctance to share authentic concerns. The team is still operating from protective patterns because those patterns have kept them safe. They're not going to abandon them just because someone new says the environment is different now. Some team members will start small tests, maybe mentioning a minor disagreement to see what happens. Others will watch these brave souls carefully assess the response. Everyone is gathering data about whether the stated values match actual consequences. This is not the time for big initiatives or pushing for vulnerability. Your job is consistency, predictability, and demonstrating through repeated action that the rules really have changed. Every interaction is being evaluated. Every response is data about whether this new reality is trustworthy. This is where Maya was when she started questioning everything. Just when you thought things were improving, the team seems to get worse. People who were cautiously optimistic become withdrawn or hostile. Resignations happen. Old issues resurface. The criticism that was suppressed under the toxic leader comes flooding out, sometimes aimed at you, the new leader, even though you weren't responsible for the original harm. This is the phase where most recovery efforts fail because it looks like failure. Now that the immediate threat is gone, nervous systems can finally let down their guard enough to feel what they've been suppressing. Think of it like this. When you're running from danger, you don't stop to process your fear, you just run. Only when you reach safety do you start shaking, crying, or feeling the full impact of what happened. Your team kept it together through survival mode because they had to. Now they're safe enough to fall apart a little, and falling apart is a part of healing. Some of your best people may leave during this phase, and it will feel devastating. But here's what's actually happening. They stayed to help the team survive the crisis. Now that the immediate danger has passed, they have bandwidth to recognize how much the experience cost them. They're not leaving because the new leader failed. They're leaving because they're finally safe enough to prioritize their own needs. These small tests from earlier, they become bigger and more direct. Team members will push boundaries to see if they're really safe. They'll express disagreement more forcefully. They'll watch carefully to see if psychological safety disappears the moment it becomes inconvenient. This isn't disrespect or insubordination. It's the necessary process of updating their threat assessment. They need to know, is this safety conditional? Does it evaporate when we're difficult or when we disagree? Do not try to return to normal productivity expectations. Do not interpret regression as your failure. Do not attempt to stop the process with reassurance or logic. Your job is to hold steady while the team processes what they couldn't process before. This is not the time to prove yourself or defend your leadership. It's the time to demonstrate that safety remains consistent, even when things are messy. If you've held steady through the regression phase, you'll start seeing something different. Tentative but genuine engagement. People begin sharing ideas again, not just safe ones, but real ones. Disagreements happen, but they're productive rather than defensive. The team starts looking forward instead of constantly referencing the past. This doesn't mean everyone is healed or that trust is fully restored. It means enough positive data has accumulated that nervous systems are beginning to recalibrate their threat assessment. After months of watching leadership behavior, patterns emerge that contradict old survival programming. The new leader has responded to challenges consistently. They've kept promises. They've maintained boundaries. They've demonstrated that safety doesn't disappear when things get difficult. The team's nervous systems are starting to build new neural pathways, not replacing the old protective patterns entirely, but adding new options for how to respond to authority, conflict, and uncertainty. You'll notice people bringing up concerns earlier rather than waiting until they become crises. Team members will disagree with each other in meetings without everyone freezing. Someone will make a mistake and actually tell you about it rather than hiding it. These are profound shifts, even though they might seem like basic professional behavior. Trust isn't built through grand gestures or inspiring speeches. It's built through hundreds of small, consistent actions that prove the stated values are real. Every time leadership responds to challenge without retaliation, every time feedback is genuinely welcomed, every time a mistake doesn't result in punishment, that's data. Over time, enough data accumulates to shift the threat assessment. This is when you can start introducing more collaborative initiatives, but still with careful attention to pacing. Don't rush toward normal. What you had before wasn't healthy. You're building something new. By this point, you'll notice the team has developed new rhythms. They've internalized that the new leadership style isn't temporary or conditional. They're investing in relationships with each other again. They're bringing creativity and innovation back to their work. The hypervigilance has decreased significantly. But, and this is important, they're not the same team they were before the toxic leadership. They're changed by what they experienced. The goal was never to return to how things were, but to build something sustainable that accounts for what they now know about vulnerability, safety, and trust. The team has done the work of metabolizing their trauma. They've felt what they needed to feel, tested what they needed to test, and gathered enough evidence to update their threat responses. New patterns have become familiar enough to feel natural rather than forced. This doesn't mean everyone has forgotten what happened or that there is no lasting impact. It means they've integrated the experience into their understanding of themselves and their work in ways that don't require constant hypervigilance. This is when you can actively co-create new ways of working together. The team has enough restored capacity to engage in intentional culture building rather than just surviving. But these norms must be built collaboratively, not imposed. Eventually imposed norms can trigger old patterns if they don't account for what the team needs. Even at this stage, maintaining recovery requires continued attention. Anniversary reactions might happen around the time the toxic leader left, or when situations arise that feel similar to past trauma. Some team members will need more time than others. New people joining will need to be integrated into a culture that understands its own history. Success at this stage isn't perfection or the absence of challenges. It's a team that has developed resilience, authentic communication, and the ability to repair when things go wrong. Understanding the timeline is just the beginning. What actually determines whether a team successfully heals or remains fractured? Let me walk you through the critical factors. First, leadership consistency over intensity. Healing doesn't require dramatic interventions or constant reassurance. It requires boring consistency. The same response to challenges every time. The same boundaries maintained regardless of pressure. The same values demonstrated through small daily actions. Second, pace matching, not pace pushing. Different team members will heal at different rates. Rushing anyone's process communicates that their pace is wrong or inconvenient. Supporting recovery means allowing each person to move at the speed their nervous system can integrate. Third, making space for the full range of responses. Some people will be angry, some will be withdrawn, some will be overly accommodating. All of these are normal responses to betrayed trust and violated safety. Trying to manage these responses away actually extends the healing timeline. Finally, acknowledging without dwelling. The team needs their experience validated, but they don't need it to become their identity. Finding the balance between acknowledging what happened and focusing on what's being built now is crucial. These aren't just nice-to-have elements. They're the difference between teams that heal and teams that stay fractured. If you're hearing this 6 weeks after a toxic leader's departure and feeling discouraged by your team's response, please hear this. You're not failing. Your team isn't broken. This is what recovery actually looks like. The months-long journey of healing from toxic leadership is exactly that. Months, not weeks. It's messy and nonlinear. It includes regression and resistance. It involves departures and difficult conversations. And all of this is not just normal, it's necessary. Your role isn't to speed up the process or make it more comfortable. Your role is to create consistent safety while the team does the hard work of recalibrating their threat responses and rebuilding trust. You can't heal for them, but you can create the conditions that allow healing to happen. When you understand what you're actually seeing at each phase, when you can recognize testing as necessary rather than insubordination, regression as integration rather than failure, and time as an essential ingredient rather than an inconvenience, you can support your team's recovery instead of inadvertently undermining it. The teams that successfully heal from toxic leadership don't do so because they had perfect new leaders or ideal circumstances. They heal because their leaders understood the timeline, trusted the process, and maintained consistent safety through every uncomfortable phase. Your team deserves the time they need, and you deserve to understand that providing that time isn't weakness or patience, it's leadership. If you're navigating the aftermath of toxic leadership and want to create sustainable healing rather than temporary relief, I can help. I'm launching a new trauma-informed leadership coaching intensive called Leading at the Nervous System Level. This intensive is designed specifically for organizational leaders who want to understand trauma-informed approaches to team recovery, culture rebuilding, and leadership development that supports healing rather than rushing it. I'll help you recognize what you're seeing at each phase, respond in ways that build rather than undermine safety, and create the conditions for genuine transformation. Get on the waitlist now. The link is in the show notes. Because your team's recovery deserves leadership that understands the journey and has the patience to walk it with them. Thanks for listening to your Trauma Wise Career Guide. I'll see you next time.
You're not walking this path alone. Every step you take toward a trauma-wise career is an act of courage, and I'm here cheering you on. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with another survivor who needs to hear this message. Together, we're rewriting the rules of career success. Keep rising, keep healing, keep building.